I don't know if you get a lot of religious publication interviews or.
No, not too many, but I'm always down to talk.
Hey, welcome to Beer Christianity. My name is Jonty. No Melchior Laura in this one, unfortunately, because it was just me who was doing this interview. It's with Gianmarco Soresi. He's one of the most interesting and exciting comics that we have got into in the last few years. He does incredible crowd work. If you've been following any comedy on social media, you will have seen clips of Gianmarco. And if you're following Zoran Mamdani's bid for New York mayor, then you will have seen Gianmarco in that as well, or his new Netflix special. There's lots of stuff coming out from Gianmarco, so hard for you to miss him, but in case you have, that's my little intro to him. Incredible interview with him, talking not just about the idea of being Jewish and being expected to be one thing or another in a political climate where I think Jewish people are asked to be spokespeople for Israel a lot of the time. Anyway, he talks about that. He talks about anti-Semitism. He talks about being expected to be pro-Israel all the time. We featured him in issue 4 of Shibboleth magazine, and this is the much longer interview where you get to hear a lot more detail about his process, his philosophy around comedy. If you're into comedy, if you're into creativity, it's just such a joy to listen to this. He's a hell of a nice guy and just so funny and thoughtful, and yeah, I don't know. I'm a big fan. I think he's very cool. I think you should check him out. Also, check out issue 4 of Shibboleth magazine if you want this in written form, where it's edited and nicely kind of, trimmed down for you and slightly more focused. And speaking of Shibboleth magazine, you will be hearing Malky and Laura on the podcast really soon. We have been spending quite a lot of time working on the next issue of the magazine. And if you subscribe before the end of October, or buy before the end of October, then you still get free UK postage on that. And you'll get it on every issue. So if you subscribe for 5 issues, you will get free UK postage on each of them. But we are bringing that to an end and kind of rationalizing that a little bit, because it is super expensive to mail things, it turns out, particularly in the UK, but internationally too. So yeah, we're hoping to make that a little bit more affordable so that we can start paying contributors and paying subscribers, well, eventually, sooner rather than later. So yeah, that's the deal. Anyway, that's our sister magazine. Check out shibbolethmag.com if you don't know it. But this is an interview with Gianmarco Soresi. He's amazing. We love him, and we think you will too.
So I guess my starting question would be, you do a lot of crowd work, but lately I've seen you tackle quite a lot of political topics, but your vibe is not, I'm a political comedian. How would you define yourself in that space?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough balance because I think when I think of people that are described traditionally as like political comedians, a lot of times they're so partisan, or they're so in line with a particular political ideology that they isolate themselves from anyone that might disagree with them, and thus I think it almost defeats the purpose of saying anything. They literally cultivate the choir to preach to, and especially in today's not just comedy world but everything world, the media landscape, you kind of select. You don't have to see anyone you don't want to. The algorithm is without you even knowing it. So if you are constantly frontward facing about like all your views, or they all fit in this one particular way, you're just not going to be seen by anyone who disagrees with you. And I also just think I'm part of that old Groucho Marx adage, I wouldn't belong to a club that would have me as a member, where like there's just a thing that any place, I just want to be critical of all things at all times. And I think that's what my role is as a comedian. I'm not a solution proposer. A lot of times people will respond to a criticism I might have of someone's actions and go, well, what would you do? And I go, well, I don't know. I'm not in charge of it. But I can, for a fact, state that this in front of me is bullshit. this, you or point out the hypocrisy of something in front of me. And I think that's where my role starts and ends. And I do that in an entertaining way. And if I choose ever to shift gears and to become a politician, become a builder, start a program, then someone else can criticize what I'm doing and the roles will shift. But me, I am on the sides. I'm criticizing everything. And, it's up to people how they want to take that and apply it or change their behavior or just enjoy it. And that's why I like to talk about politics. But to be a political comedian, I would have to, I'm not willing to put my stake in the ground as much to do that.
Yeah. So how do you navigate that in a context now where, as you say, everything is so political and so polarized, where the demand must be enormous for you to propose a solution, and give us your program?
I just think I have an allergy that I try to keep sensitive to pandering. When am I pandering? When am I just saying something people agree with? Because then that's not, in my mind, that's not comedy. It's kind of it's just a collective cheering of, hey, yeah, we all are right.
Yeah.
And I just don't think it's funny ultimately. I think the funniest stuff, and I'm not saying I always hit this mark, is where you go, oh my God, you see the truth of something, but it's so inappropriate. But and obviously some comedians have taken that to just do mean humor. So I want a surprise. I want it to be a new thought. But especially it's not a bit that I've released yet because I'm still fine tuning it. But it's it's this feeling as a Jewish comedian who criticizes Israel. Sometimes online people will comment. They assume if I say that I'm Jewish, that I must be a Zionist, and then other people say, well, if I'm not a Zionist, that means I'm not Jewish. And so so there's the literal form where I go oh, this is weird or whatever. And then the comedic version is, sometimes I feel like I need a country of my own. And it's how do I take the original thing, which is just here's life, and how do I come up with an absurd, funny, irreverent solution to it in a way that, again, I'm not proposing a policy. I'm just kind of taking it to its comedic but weirdly logical conclusion. And that's what I strive for more and more, especially in another Trump era where it's easy to just kind of be critical of everything this man and his administration does, where I feel like I really witnessed a lot of great comics feel the need so deeply to talk about everything Trump was doing, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, that first of all, they lost anyone who didn't agree with them. So they no longer were swaying or challenging everyone. But B, they turned a blind eye to anything anyone did outside of Trump. Everyone, it was so easy to be a hero in the Trump administration. Yeah. And so that's why, again, the moment that you feel like you're part of a club, the moment you're getting invited to too many political fundraisers and they're happy to have you there, that's where I go, you have to have an allergy of, uh-oh, I'm no longer a comedian. I'm just part of the group.
Yeah. And you've been pretty vocally critical of Bill Maher lately. You want to talk a little bit about that? About were you ever an admirer, and what has changed in him?
I feel like I never got him when I was younger, but I didn't particularly care. I knew that he made that documentary Religulous, I believe it's the title.
Yeah.
And I think at the time, as I had I wasn't raised religious, so I didn't have as much vitriol towards this thing, but I just didn't like it. And so there was parts that I liked this guy who was seemingly bucking against the system. There was, he got in trouble for such weird things, but I said it's kind of brave, I guess. He's pissing people off. And I think ultimately there's some validity in that. But then as you get older, you see yes, he's insults religion, but he's way more Islamophobic than he is anything else. And yes, he criticizes religion, but then suddenly he said like, but the Bible promised Israel to the Jew, and you go, how in God's name are you citing the Bible? And I think the thing with Trump, just having dinner with Trump and so quickly swaying, it's not surprising,
No.
but it's so all these media heads, you just see them claim so intensely. They so black and white claim Trump as a fascist and said he tried to overturn the election. And then they all kind of shifted to like, well, let's hear him out. Let's talk, blah, blah, blah. That you just see it so bald faced, how full of shit it all is. And, unfortunately, it's a lot of people listen to Bill Maher. Bill Maher has built a well sold brand as like the voice of reason, the counterculture guy, the guy who's liberal, but he's not with these crazy people. And, that's the brand. And I know people who listen to him. And that's where I get mad. I don't care if Bill Maher he's an old rich fuck. He wants to have dinner with other rich fucks. It's that people listen to him as like he's kind of cool. And I'm like, he's not cool. He's hanging out with the principal.
Yeah. So how do you navigate that then? Because that concept of like he's liberal, but he's not with these crazies. But at the same time, there's that thing of like, I don't want to pander, but I also have my kind of morals, my ethics. I don't want to be part of the problem here. This seems like a particularly difficult time to be a comic who doesn't want to pander, who doesn't want to just end up like Bill, but you do want to do, because you walk a really good line, I think, in this of you'll make it then the bit of like, oh, I got that wrong in a piece of crowd work, where now you're getting onto some dangerous ground, and it becomes so exciting and so interesting because you're not going to be righteousness telegraphing the whole time,
Sure. I mean, I think it's like I'm constantly having to fortify and question what are my lines. Like, for example, me and my podcast co-host, we have a policy of no politicians on the podcast, at least right now. And that's like, and it's partially because I don't want my podcast to become a hangout for politicians. I don't feel that I have the requisite skills to question them as intensely or with as much intelligence as I think they should be. I don't want to be responsible for them if they turn around suddenly. Now I have to revoke my support, blah, blah, blah. And maybe there's a time where it'll change. Maybe there's a time I'll feel like, oh, this is meaningful or good or interesting. But at least right now, in the moment that I think entertainers have gotten to, we need to create a little more distance again. And I don't. So, but then again, I did a fundraiser where some money went to Zoran in New York recently, and I go, I like him, wouldn't have him on the podcast. Am I willing to do my comedy work to have money go to that person? I'm like, okay, sure. Maybe I'll change my mind at some point in that, and I'll go, no, if I'm going to give money or do a show, let it be for, a cause or a group as opposed to a politician. I don't know. And maybe I'll have to backtrack. But what I do know is that I'm trying, at least with the podcast, at least with the way I literally interact with those people, I want there to be separation until I have some different view of what it should be.
Yeah, absolutely. That seems very wise, to be honest.
Because I mean, any human beings understands it, in their own lives. But when you meet someone and you see them at events, it's hard to be honest about them. And I think I want people to feel like, for my own craft, for my own comedy, and for the people who come to me, I want them to feel like I am not bought and sold or influenced in that way.
Yeah.
It seems silly, whenever you talk about the arts compared to, but like the same way you wouldn't want your politician, buddying up with the head of ExxonMobil or whatever, you wouldn't want your comedian to be butting up with the powers that be.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fascinating to hear you speak about this because you seem to have such a passion for that, for somebody who doesn't think of himself as a political comedian. Like you've got a quite strong line here.
Yeah, I think the reason that I am a comedian is I want to talk. I feel a need to speak, and this isn't just politics. It's like I want to speak honestly from something. It's like it's an itch. It's something I need to do, and if I don't, I feel ill. I don't feel honest. I don't feel connected. So whether it's my family or my political views or my own fears and wants, I strive to be as close to being able to share that truth because it makes me feel good.
Yeah.
And the further away I get from that, the more I just feel like a phony, a fraud, and I don't feel good about what I do with my work.
Yeah. Coming back to the assumption that people make of, he's Jewish, he must be a Zionist, or when they find out that you're not, how much do you get that kind of attention? How much do you get that? I'm assuming more since Gaza and all that kind of stuff, because there's a whole bunch of really unfair stuff that's happened since then. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean it really just depends with the internet. It just depends if a joke is going viral or not. I mean, that's kind of like or however, if an article comes out or something. It doesn't it's never like come up with a show. No one's come to my shows and heckled me with that. So you just take it as it comes, and sometimes people get really mad. I think sometimes I speak pretty harshly. I'll make jokes that are purposely a little bit pointed because I see is Jewish Zionists so weaponize the Jewish card or the Holocaust card to win an argument so resolutely, and I feel okay. This is one of the spaces where I can make a really a harsh comeback. I remember there's one that I definitely this was the one I think. There was one show where someone, wrote, "I'm going to come and, beat the shit out of you" or something. I don't get too many threats, but like this rattled me a little bit. I think I brought pepper spray with me to the show just in case. But it was like someone was intimating that because someone took a picture of a Palestinian, he was sitting in a chair, drinking like an espresso, but amidst rubble. They were basically saying, this person saying, my husband's great grandfather survived the Holocaust, and I'll tell you, he wasn't wearing a nice pair of pants, sipping an espresso. They're basically intimating like it's not what you're saying it is because of this one picture, and it's, to me, I see it and I go, it's such a misuse. It literally is counterintuitive to what I was raised to be the lessons of the Holocaust, which is that any group of people can suffer, that humanity was capable of horrible things. And I see the misuse. I see the fact that, most people, it struggles to weigh in because someone's talking about, but also, by the way, it's not even her fucking great grandfather, it's her husband's great grandfather. And so I come in and I go, I think I quote tweeted and I was like, it's not our fault your husband's great grandpa didn't have any Riz or something. It's very, and it's purposefully crass.
Yeah.
But it's also like, it's also so, if it was like, if it was the great grandfather commenting, maybe we could decide it being too harsh or whatever. But it's this person literally using it as like an undefeatable tool. And I want to go, as the comedians want, is you're full of shit, and just undermining it completely. And so people got mad at that one, of course, because they go, you're being flippant about this thing, and it's like, well, you were weaponizing this thing. So for my money, you're exploiting the Holocaust to prove your own personal political point and to undermine a whole group being bombed mercilessly. And I have the social clout simply for being a Jewish person to kind of speak honestly about it.
Yeah.
And that's where I think, I lean into the fact that I am a Jewish person to make those jokes that other people might be too scared to make, or they'll be accused of being an anti-Semite. And I'll also say that, as a result of that, some Jewish people, they will say you're not Jewish. You're just, they say they don't say I'm lying per se, but they say, you don't know anything about it. You're not really. And that's where I go. All my life, I have been chased down by Hasidic Jews going, are you Jewish? Are you Jewish? I've been asked by Jewish people, come do this, come do that. You're a Jew no matter what, all this stuff. And frankly, in a way that always made me feel uncomfortable because, again, groups make me itch. And I go, it's just those moments of pure hypocrisy where I feel I have the authority to be like, oh, I'm not a Jew. Fuck you. This has literally been the whole MO this whole time, is that we're all Jewish, and then we disagree about this, and now you say I'm not. You're full of shit. You don't have a leg to stand on. It doesn't move me emotionally. I don't feel like, oh no, what if you're right? Oh no, I have to do this to be Jewish. It's clear, 100% pure manufactured propagandistic bullshit. And that's fun to make fun of. That's the role, I think.
Absolutely. What does the Jewish side of your family say, and do you care?
Luckily, I mean, my mom is the Jewish side. Her parents told her she could either have a bat mitzvah or a sweet 16, and she chose the latter, and that was the real kind of disillusion. I will say, when I was, I think, 24, I'm 36 now. I did the birthright trip when I was 24. And my only defense is I went to college for musical theater, and I didn't know a single fucking thing about the world.
Yeah.
But, so there's people from that, certainly, that, you notice they don't check in maybe as much. I hear, my girlfriend grew up in a Chabad community, and I know her friends, a couple of her friends wrote her. And then I'm sure I have some uncles who have had some conversations with each other, but I haven't cared about their opinions on any other aspect of my life. So I'm not going to start with a different country.
Yeah, absolutely. But I guess my sense is that you, like you were saying, you have this ability to speak out in a way because of your Jewishness. When the Jewishness is being weaponized in a way that somebody who isn't Jewish can't, because there's this great fear around it of the weaponization of the accusation of anti-Semitism, but at the same time a huge rise in anti-Semitism.
Sure.
How are you navigating that?
I just think that it's so clearly being obfuscated by Israel, and where they talk about anti-Semitism on campus, and there's a very purposeful not parsing between anti-Semitism and people maybe shunning a friend because they disagree with their political views. And it's just so obvious. And so my blame right now, it goes more towards the people insisting that criticizing Israel is anti-Semitic. I go, you are tying Jews to a foreign country, and you're doing more damage. You're doing so much more damage. And I think, like, look, you always have to deal whenever there's, if you see a swastika in the bathroom, someone puts it on the stall, you got to deal with it. You got to figure it out. But you also have to question, other than the individual incident, like, how do we holistically heal the world? And I see people doing it I see especially some Jewish people doing it in a way where I go, you are making things worse. I'm close enough to show business where, there were actors that were fired. There were clients that were dropped by their Jewish manager or their Jewish agent. And I go, you're insane. You think that you're going to weaponize show business and somehow skirt the allegations that the Jews run the media. Like that's all you're doing is you can't deal with problems in that way.
Yeah.
And so that's where my anger is towards. Now, of course, there's anti-Semitic people, and I would argue that a lot of Zionists are kind of allying themselves with people who ultimately are anti-Semitic, but are also Zionists because in their mind they love the idea of all the Jews being in one place, And I go, this is so short-sighted. This is so short-sighted. So that's where my anger is towards right now. It also is those are the people that I know. I don't have too many friends that are baldly anti-Semitic. I do have some friends or acquaintances or colleagues who are more on the lines of going if you're not a Zionist, you're anti-Semitic. And I go, you are the problem in front of me. You're the people I know. You're the people whose bullshit I can smell. And that's the vantage point I write my comedy. I'm not here to write from a universal perspective. I'm not a universe. I'm just an individual. And from my vantage point, that's where I'm able to write better jokes from. So that's where my focus is. That's where my target is, because that's what I can see more clearly.
Yeah. I'm a white South African, and a lot of my white South African friends who are still conservative. I'm not friends with racists, but you'll encounter family members or people when you're out kind of in the street, and you get into arguments with them, and they're like, "Well, what about the ANC? What about the black government? All that kind of stuff." I'm like, your fucking racism is my problem because I'm from your community, and I have to speak out against that. And honestly, that's the bigger fucking problem at the moment, as far as I can tell, especially in terms of what I can do something about. And there's that you almost reserve your more visceral anger for the people that claim you,
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
The context, though, is that there's this terrible thing happening in terms of what's being done to the Palestinians in Gaza and in the West Bank and all that kind of stuff. There was that famous quote, and I'm not smart enough to know who said it, but about how we can't make jokes anymore in a world where the Holocaust happened. We can't make art in the world. Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
And I guess it's that thing of how do you, when you're politically aware, when you're engaged and all that kind of stuff, do you feel a pressure to go, I should be making everything about this deeply meaningful thing? Or do you feel a pressure to say, I have a responsibility to distract people from that shit? What is the...
It really is I don't choose kind of what comes to me. I maybe if I was more talented, I could literally focus on one thing over the other. I really speak kind of to what's in front of me. And I think the lessons that I took from the comedy in the first Trump term is that hyper intense focusing on things is not inherently more powerful. It's just it can become numbing. And you have to have people liking you if you're going to influence them. And nobody likes someone who's just, talking about the bad thing 24/7. You have to remind them of your humanity, their humanity. Why should they want to care? You have to remind them of also the humor and the comedy of what life can be aside from just the bad thing. And I feel like what happened with a lot of those comedians is that Trump felt like such a viscerally bad thing that it had to be addressed every second. And I get it, especially his actions aside. He would say something every day that would feel so repugnant. You're like, someone has to address this. And I go, look, it was not effective at all.
Yeah.
It was not effective at all. And you have to, I believe that one's art has to reflect the diversity of your own mind. That if you become hyper focused, it would be the same way that if you only thought about one thing, you would become a miserable human being. And so I think it just has to flow.
Yeah.
And my political stuff, sometimes I go, oh, would it be nice to have more? Would it be nice to? But then it comes as it comes. And if I wait for the inspiration to strike, it's usually much better material.
What percentage of your work is art versus craft? When I watch you, there's this smoothness, this naturalness, this kind of effortlessness. So it feels like pure art, like just flowing from you. But I imagine there's a whole lot of work that goes into crafting it to make it that way. Or yeah, what's the percentage there?
Sure. I mean, I really just kind of float around the day, sometimes a little bit stoned, sometimes just busy, and I just take a lot of notes. I take a lot of notes, any funny thought, any funny idea. And I feel like if I were to break it down like that, I would think of it more like inspiration versus the craft, and they're both kind of the art at the end of the day. And it's like I put it in my phone. I have a Word document here. I I I might write it down, and the craft part can be kind of the, ooh, how do I put these two things together? Where do I move the word? How do I build it up? How do I make more of a clause to mislead from the punchline? And that's kind of the really technical side of things. And then when I'm on stage, I allow my mind to wander. I go back to the inspiration. I think a lot more about like the musicality of what I say and the rhythm of what I say, and so it really is this flow from kind of being a writer and being a performer, and then ultimately it just, once the writing is done, I can let it to the side and just live it. So it's a flow state, and it really fluctuates, and there's times where I feel like I'm lacking in inspiration, and I go, okay, focus on the words and the technical rearrangement and the order. And then other times I'm like, I have a good edible, and I am just like, I writing down all this shit, and maybe 5% of it is decent, but that's enough.
Yeah. Your movements on stage as well. How much of that is choreographed and how much of that is just being you? Because I saw that one clip of another a comedian doing her version of you,
Yes, yes, Charlie
which was
Day.
just, I hadn't noticed any of those things consciously until she did that, and I was just like, that's incredible. Is that part of it? Is that part of what you craft? Where am I going to be standing? Am I going to do that turning to the back thing and the
Yeah, there's definitely like there's some things that I've eventually, some moves, some turns that like evolve naturally, and then I codify it. But in general, I think I I struggle staying still. I am, whether it's ADD, whether it's anxiety, whether it's OCD. It's many little things that just result in me moving in a way that I did definitely like lean into it in allowing whatever I feel to happen. But I've always sat in a strange way. I've always felt just a little bit too long and lanky. And when I was a little kid, like when I was like 4 or 5, I used to like dance in the living room with my mom and dad separately. And I had this urge where I was like, I told them we need to put our living room on a stage so people can watch this. Whatever the desire is to be witnessed, that feeling joy isn't enough. It's like the joy has to be witnessed to complete the picture. Like that's literally part of my DNA.
yeah.
And sometimes I think I'm not a dancer, but in a way I literally am doing. I'm fulfilling what I wanted as that child. I have a stool on stage, I have some furniture, and I am dancing, in my own way. I'm sure my dancing is similar to whatever dancing when I was 4. And it's a poetic way of looking at it, but I think of it like, yeah, that's ultimately what I want to do, is kind of like a pure form of expression, my mind, my voice, and my body. And that's, stand-up comedy is like literally getting to do all of it all at once.
Yeah, absolutely. There's also an immense charm and likability about you that it's not everyone's shtick, like a lot of people have that
Sure.
thing of like, I'm going to be an asshole, I'm going to be confrontational. Whereas there's almost like um, I don't want to say flirting with the audience, but there's an element of that and the charm. And I just wanted to, we don't even have to put it in, but are you actually an asshole, or or are you this as nice and charming as you come across on in your gigs?
No, I'm definitely listen. I'm definitely I can be totally mean and judgy. And there's times, there's times where I'll do a crowd work thing and like I don't I try to make the wrong joke and I might hurt someone's feelings. I just think I don't come from a place. I don't want people to feel bad. That doesn't mean I can't be a bitch in private or say terrible things. But like my intention is not for that person to feel bad. I want them in on the joke. And even if I like sometimes try to like be a little cooler or a little meaner, I eventually kind of crack under the like if a person felt bad, you'd see it in my body. Again, like I try to strip it away where you see, oh my God, I didn't mean to. And I'll make that part of the
Yeah.
the act. But I also think it's like I know a lot of comics, as straight cis white guys that like, you know, if I'm talking to a 19-year-old kid who just came out as non-binary to their parents, and it's like, there can be this feeling of like, how do I joke? How do I joke? What is one allowed to say? And I definitely there are different times in society where it's like some more people in one era might be like, watch yourself, and then other times it might be more relaxed. But I think my meanness or my jokes or my ribbing is rarely about the person's identity in and of itself, like you're stupid or that's weird or that's wrong, and it's more joking within the framework of it being what it is. And there's moments like I had a crowd work thing recently, and it was at a college, and this audience member was talking about their roommate, and their roommate had a new partner, and they were nervous. They were going to hook up in their dorm room or whatever. And I said something about, are they two guys? And this person said, no, they're both non-binary. And so it's like, and then the joke I ended up going with like, oh, so I guess instead of 69ing, do they zero? And it's like, it's a moment where like, even after, and it worked in the room,
Yeah.
but even after I was like, I have those questions, you go, I don't know. Is there a world where people are bothered by this on the internet? You ask yourself those things, and then ultimately you go, no, I don't think so. I think it's clear from the way that I talk about it. It's not a joke at the expense of the non-binary. In fact, I'm going. I treat it as regular. Oh, they're both non-binary, and then a joke from that circumstance, and ultimately, it's always nice when a non-binary person comments and they go, I like that joke. I don't think I shouldn't always be like wanting everyone to like me all the time. But I think like you can be mean or do mean jokes from a place where you don't have hate in your heart for the person.
Yeah.
And you can get away with a lot as long as if the deep thought isn't, well, you're mentally ill or you shouldn't exist. I think you can get away with a lot.
Yeah.
Comedically.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
Do you have like an ethical line in crowd work of going like, actually, when did you have to decide, I'm not going to be mean, I'm not going to make people feel like shit, and does that run alongside a kind of thought of like, how is this going to play on the internet? Like, how much do these things run into it, or is it just a natural, this is who I want to be as a person generally?
Look, at the end of the day, I if there's a clip if there's an interaction I don't think is good, I'm not gonna put it out. There is an editing, of course, that goes into this. I just push it in the moment. I really don't have much time to. If I were to be more of an editor in the moment, it would be less funny. I would go less places. I just kind of have to push it. And of course, there's times like, sometimes an audience member says something that's kind of fucked up, and I'm like, that's not worth putting it out there. Or they'll say something that you're like, I think what you're saying that you did is a crime, maybe. And in the moment, I tried to make it funny, but you don't feel good. You're like, I shouldn't have made that funny. and then there's just like lessons about self-righteousness that I learned when I did a gig in North Carolina a couple years ago, and Brittany Griner had just been released from the prison in Russia, and I had a joke that was like a subversive joke, but it wasn't about Brittany Griner per se, but it started with that setup, and it was like a it was a good twisty mean joke that I was proud of that wasn't preachy. But I started at this gig and I go, Brittany Griner was released from foreign prison, from Russian prison, and his audience member said, "Boo!" And I was too. I hadn't learned my lessons yet. I said, "I think it's good when an American is released from a foreign prison," and it was so not funny. No one in the audience liked it. That guy came up to me afterwards and he felt bad, which maybe he should have, but he came up and he was like, I was just joking, man, and then left. And then I felt like an asshole. And it's just like, again, it's people bought money to a comedy show. So if I want to do anything extra, if I want to sway people, if I want to challenge people, it's got to be funny first.
Yeah.
It's got to be funny first. And the second you lose that, it's imagine if when you went to a restaurant and you ordered your omelet and before the waiter gave you the omelet, they told you, uh, you know, any political view, you'd go. That's I just wanted an omelet. So
Yeah.
you have to figure out a way to do it, and maybe there's a crafty way, maybe there's a smooth way they get it in there, but they have to do the thing first before they do whatever extra they want to add.
It's funny because so much of what you're saying is so close to this kind of comedy is legal now, and you can't, nobody can make jokes anymore and all that kind of stuff. In that sense of the purity of making comedy, and it's important to go out there on a limb and all that kind of stuff, and yet it's not feeling like that weird MAGA, comedy is legal bullshit. And I'm trying to find what the core is that makes the difference there. What is it? Because there's similarities, but you're coming to such a different place and doing it in such a different way.
I think it's always going to be the case of comedy has context. There's the idea of like comedy being legal or comedy not being legal. It's as simplistic a way to look at the world as being like when people go like we need free speech, and you're like no one in the history of the world has ever fully believed in this childish version of pure free speech. Everyone has caveats, and the same thing with comedy is legal. For a lot of those people, they had like a series of jokes that they wish they could make, but like you won't see any of those comedians really make fun of Joe Rogan. It's like truly because that's their employment is tied to that, or they won't make. It's like they'll look at what's his name. He insults comic. He died. Don Rickles. They'll look at Don Rickles and they'll be like, "Oh, look what he got away with." It's like, yeah, he did that, but he also like, there's other harsh things he didn't say about people in power. Yeah, he got to say some slurs that we don't say anymore in this. Which it's comedy exists within society. That's why it's one of the reasons comedy can age really poorly because it is. It's kind of it talks about the thing in front of it, and so that's why if you look at old comedy and you aren't kind of in tune with this reflected a different time, and I don't just mean that in like this said a slur, but in any social norms, it's going to feel super stale. You have to view it in the framework with which it exists, and that's why a lot of those comedians they said, why can't I make the old racist joke? Why can't I make the old gay joke? And it's like because that's not the world we live in anymore. And it feels lazy, and ultimately look they get it, they got it back to a degree. There's more spaces they can go say more slurs and not get fired from their job. I don't think the comedy's better though, and I think they're ultimately going to find the hollowness of it. I think like there's just certain words that they feel like it was some kind of victory, but they'll quickly find out that there's just nothing to it. Anyone can say a word. Anyone can say a word. And I'm probably more as a comedian, I'm probably more lenient on language than I imagine the average person would be. even if it's not something I practice in my own comedy per se, because I have my own, my own calculations. But those guys, they just thought it was so simple. They just acted like comedy was so much simpler than art is. It is more nuanced. And also, by the way, there was times where people did say those whatever words you have in your mind, and they did it in a way that somehow worked. And people look at that and they go, well, why can't I do that? And it's like, well, because you didn't do what they did. And I don't know what to tell you. The world isn't fair. Art isn't fair. Talent isn't equally distributed. And you pick your battles. And I know I'm rambling a little bit, but I think like there was certainly a time during, I think, COVID era when we were all online where like you could get in what felt like outsized social consequence for one joke, particularly a joke you put out at a different time. And I do agree there was like some overzealousness in one of those things where like, well, we couldn't change the power at the top, so we punished very intensely the things within our control. And I do agree some of it was absurdly outsized and a little too excited to do it. But the world's also changed since then. And like you can't be stuck living in that place. Comedy moves on, it exists. And a lot of those comedians that maybe got the short end of that stick, most of them are fine. Most of them are fine and figured out a different thing and have evolved on their own. And so living and having your art be born just of that resentment is very boring and two-dimensional.
Well, it's like that. If your art is there to kind of push a polemic or a message, there's a Christian mag, and there's a Christian comedy scene which just even the words just make the blood run cold. Like just have you encountered any of it?
Oh yeah, I think Mike Huckabee had like a talk show and he had a lot of these. I mean, it's brutal. Yeah. It's brutal. And because there's just a lot of, you see the audiences for it. They're very old. And I think there's just a delicacy of like, please don't make me feel bad about any aspect of my life. And the walls start closing in and then you just get the most milquetoast. I mean, just insane. Yeah. In comedy where there's so few jokes to make, you have to sprinkle it with a couple Bible verses here and there just so you can fill your 60-minute time slot.
Are religious audiences like are they naturally harder to kind of, or religious audience members, are they naturally harder to kind of deal with, or like what's the general view from you?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done too many shows where everyone is the same religion. I would honestly say like the hardest audiences are, am I using this word correctly? Homogenous audiences.
Yeah.
That's what the hardest audience is. If it's, I certainly do shows where I see people, with a crucifix or with yarmulkes or whatever, and sometimes I'm surprised that they like me because sometimes if I am in a particular mood, I will go pretty hard. But that's fine because again, like you really want, and I think this can be hard with, as I said earlier, the way that we gather our fan bases via the algorithm and social media. It can become homogenous, but ultimately, like I really do think the ideal is you want there to be some distance so people can react partially off how others are reacting to it, and within that they don't feel attacked or overwhelmed. And I think like if you're dealing with, I haven't been invited to many temple shows since sharing my views on Israel, that's for sure. But like that's where like, if everyone can collectively decide that they're all offended, it gives them a lot of power.
Yeah.
If you're kind of a little bit perturbed, but your neighbor's laughing, I think it's healthier because you ultimately go, okay, great. And then maybe you're laughing at something and your neighbor's not, and you go, all right, one for you. You get that feeling. So it's not so much religious audiences. It's more like homogenous audiences are where things can shift and people's mindset can become more about the whole and not their individual humanity to the individual humanity of the comedian.
Yeah. That's amazing. It sounds like comedy as genuinely almost healing art, good for society in and of itself when it's like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be. It can also, I think it can also be weaponized so badly in terms of just like making, if it doesn't challenge, if your comedy is just like making fun of gay people or making fun of trans people, it can so quickly become a rallying cry or just a kind of hey, look, we all think this. We have a lot more power here to shut it down, and that's you can be very harmful. And I've seen it. I've just seen it. I think Trump weaponizes comedy in a strong way, and I think that movement, played off of the way a lot of people felt chastised by what again I think was like an overzealous and not a nuanced approach to kind of shifting people and also focusing on like word policing, which I don't just I never go like you should say that person is allowed to say that. I don't think that, but I think when you get caught up in those weeds, you annoy people. They're kind of annoyed. A leader comes along and says, "Hey, aren't you all annoyed? Look how many of us are annoyed. We could win an election with this annoyance," and that's where it becomes weaponized. It can all be used for ill too.
Great. Well, I hope you use your power for good as much as possible. You
I
seem
will
to
do
be,
my best.
which is good. Yeah, as a fan, thank you very much, and also thanks for doing the interview. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Beer Christianity. You can find out more at beerchristianity.co.uk. Please don't go to our Libsyn site. It's so ugly. But yeah, you can find us on most socials. You can find Shibboleth Magazine at shibbolethmag.com. And yeah, drop us a line, say hello, tell us what you think, suggest a guest. We're into it, man. We're into it. Yeah, have a lovely day. We love you. Bye.